the audience would. Okay. Jin, are you there? I will give her a few minutes. Jin, are you there? And we saw her before. That was the important thing. Now I think what she's probably trying to do is to get out of the last video call and get on to this one. Either they're going to see, the audience would see either her slides or her, because we're not projecting any video. So one of the two things, probably it's going to be her.
Yeah.
Jin, are you there? Stand by for you.
Again, just as we did before, but you may have to sign out of the previous call to get into this one.
Okay, am I on now? I should be. It says live.
Did you sign out of it to say you could see live? But you see on the screen, you see yourself?
Well, I see us. I am speaking.
We can hear you.
Okay, but this means I still won't. I'm still not able to see you, right?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought since we switched or you reloaded, I thought we were. Okay. 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 Bye-bye.
Jin, we have your first slide up. Perhaps you'd like to just say a few words of introduction about yourself, and then we can begin with the slides.
Yes, that would be great. Good evening or good afternoon. I'm like, what time zone is it? My goodness.
Eastern Standard.
Right, exactly. Well, I know everyone's in I think, the Woolworth building, correct?
No, we're in Bopes Library, NYU's main library.
Oh, okay. Different building, but in New York.
Correct, in New York.
Right. Well, then good early evening. It's a pleasure. I can't see you, which feels really weird since I'm staring at a screen and speaking to it, but I'm just going to imagine a room filled with students. So I work with young women, and actually many times with men as well, same age, many in universities. So I always like to know who you are. So second slide, Colette.
I'm advancing now, Jin.
Okay. I should be able to see, right?
I'm not sure if you can see the slides. I just advanced to the second slide, though.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I have a screen that I thought it was yours that you for some reason I'm not able to see the advancing of the slide. I could only see a small screen with myself.
All right, I think that that's what's being archived and broadcast. So what I would suggest is, as soon as you want me to advance a slide, just let me know and I will do it for you. In the meantime, the students here, all 17, do see the slides on the screen. We actually have 2 screens here with your slides.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to assume you're on slide 2 then, since I can't
share with me who you are.
Exactly. So maybe if everyone can go around and share share with me who you are. And there's a sentence, 2 sentences actually, that says I am, fill in the blank, and then followed by I'm interested in, passionate about. So I can.
All right, well, we're going to start basically, Alex. Could you share with Jin who you are and what you're passionate about, please? Try to speak up and see if she hears you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Jin, can you hear Alex now?
I can.
Okay. I'm Alex, and I'm interested in learning and passionate about learning all about different cultures and languages.
Robert.
Okay. Great.
Robert, I am passionate about overseas travel.
Alex.
I'm Alex. I'm passionate about women's empowerment.
Shannon.
Wait, I couldn't hear. She's passionate about what?
Women's empowerment.
Okay, great.
Shannon.
I'm Shannon, and I'm passionate about social and climate justice.
Shannon's passionate about social climate justice.
Okay.
Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia, and I'm passionate about human rights protection, mainly during mass atrocities.
Human rights protection during mass atrocities. Jin.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Zaytoon, and I'm passionate about peace building.
Zaytoon is passionate about peace building.
Okay.
Ron, I'm interested in human rights and international law.
Human rights and international law, and that's Ron.
Okay.
I'm Maria Christina. I'm interested in foreign cultures, the implementation of the private sector, and foreign languages.
Okay. Stephanie.
What was that? Colette, repeat what you
All
said.
right, Jin, hang on for a moment. Maria Christina, could you please repeat that?
I'm Maria Christina. I'm interested in foreign cultures and foreign languages and the private sector.
Foreign cultures, foreign languages, and the private sector. That's Maria Christina.
Okay.
Stephanie, I'm passionate about education and global health.
Stephanie is passionate about education and global health.
Okay.
My name is Steve, and I'm interested in human rights.
Steve is interested in human rights. Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica, and I'm interested in international education.
Happen.
Erica is interested in international education. Sophie.
Okay.
I'm Sophie. I'm interested in energy policies in emerging countries.
Sophie's interested in energy policies in emerging countries.
Okay.
I'm Anne. I'm interested in global affairs, especially in U.S.-China relations.
Anne is interested in U.S.-China relations.
Okay.
I'm Tatiana. I'm interested in international development.
Tatiana is interested in international development. That's everyone here, Jin.
Okay, great. Wow. Wonderful. That's so
Oh,
exciting.
sorry, please. Zainab?
Yes. Hi, my name is Zainab, and I'm interested in humanitarian assistance and international development.
Zainab is interested in humanitarian assistance and international development.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, what a great group. And I actually wrote all of it down because the work that I do, believe it or not, is applicable to every one of these. And in fact, when I am working in other countries or even in the United States, you know, I ask young people what is the most pressing issue of our time, and many times it's the same things that that you all have articulated. And when I ask them, what do you think is the solution? They kind of give me this blank stare. Because, you know, if we all had the solution, I guess we would be working on it. And well, first, I do want to acknowledge a celebration. I don't know if you know what day it is today. Does anyone know what day it is?
Does anyone know what day it is today? We're asking Jin.
Oh, do they not know?
I think we're trying to see. It looks like they do not know.
They do not know. Well, today is International Youth Day.
International Youth Day.
That's right. And so I have been bombarded with news and, you know, from to youth government that is letting people know what young people are doing today and really empowering and creating agents of change is so critical. And in fact, I would say that today the most critical crisis we are having is really leadership. And if there was better leadership in all these issues that everyone articulated, I definitely do believe that we would be in a much different place. So if we can advance to the next slide, Colette.
Okay. Next slide, gender side.
Right. Exactly. So I'm going to tell you who I am and what I'm passionate about. Well, besides the fact that my name is Jin In, I am a girl. And my passion and my mission is to develop the next generation of women leaders around the world. And that is because I recently heard President Carter speak about his book, and he wrote a book recently called Call to Action. And he articulates it in a very profound way. He says that the world's worst genocide ever in history was the Holocaust. It killed about 6 million people of Jewish descent. If you could imagine that multiple times the 6 million, it has been killed, and that's the girls. And sadly, this has happened by their own parents. So The Economist wrote an article called The Gender Side, and actually it's now 4 years old, but it really is the moral obligation and a critical issue of our time. And the reason why it's also so very important, besides the fact that all these girls are getting killed, is because actually it's intimately related to so much violence in the world and, you know, lack of freedom, human rights. I mean, all these things that everyone talked about. And in fact, I believe that you know, until we address this issue, there is going to be no sustainable way that all the other issues will be we'll be able to tackle it. Now, what's interesting about this work that I do is that, remarkably, if you advance to the next slide, Colette.
Smarter economics, investing in girls.
Right. What's so very interesting is that this problem and this atrocity is actually the answer to itself. And this report, as comical as this cover page looks like, is actually a report that was launched at the World Bank. And it had the largest audience, and it was launched at the World Economic Forum, which many of you might know, especially if you're interested in global development and economy and etc. It's where it's in Davos, and the World Economic Forum launched this report, and it was standing room only. I mean, governments and world leaders has actually never even heard of such a remarkable solution. And if you advance to the next slide, Colette.
The girl effect dividend.
Right. This slide, which it's probably a little the words are real tiny and small for you, but it shows just in 5 countries why this is such a remarkable and unbelievable solution. Because, so this is actually showing what in each country they can do, in these 5 countries, to invest in girls, in adolescent girls, that is. And this is some of the work that I was asked to come work with, and they brought a handful of people way back when, and people who really worked with girls, and how we thought that we can really change the conversation. Instead of really looking at girls as the poverty issue and the kind of the aid victim issue, how can we change the conversation and really then revamp this as the solution to so many of our problems today? So going, this is in 5 countries, and I can see a little bit better than you can. So I'll tell you that the countries are Kenya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, and India. And we're talking about issues from secondary education to fair economic opportunities to healthcare. If you add up the numbers, I don't know if we have some math majors, you are talking about close to $500 billion into the global economy. This is how powerful this group is if we invest in them. And this is, again, only 5 countries. And in fact, I believe, Colette, your professor sent the Huffington Post article that I had recently just posted, that in a country like Nigeria, if they invested in girls, it would be adding, you know, just on the economic front. You know, we're not even talking about all the other issues that they could be investing in, but just in economy, if they gave fair wages and closed the gender gap of boys versus girls, that they would be adding close to $14 billion into the Nigerian economy. And that's remarkable because Nigeria is actually the largest country in Africa, and it's also the most populous country in Africa. It's also where the Boko Haram, and not an accident, is really obviously oppressing, and they don't want girls to go to school. So they, you know, most people in these groups, they know the powerful impact of girls. So if you go to the next slide, I will just quickly go through them. This is the reason why I started the work. You know, after seeing these horrible numbers, you know, and in fact, the Economist article is about the 100 million missing girls around the world. They've been killed or aborted or neglected, left to die, simply because they were born with 2X chromosome. No fault of their own, but just because they were girls, the family either aborted them or killed or neglected them to die. In this year alone, over 14 million girls are going to be married as a child. And I always tell people, because that seems such a huge number, that's almost twice the size of New York City. Of course, we all know it's the largest city in the United States, and that's all 5 boroughs combined. So this is such a huge number of girls, you know, again, no fault of their own, that I decided that this, you know, it was my call to action, and what can I do? And so my approach is obviously why I'm speaking with you all today, because it, you know, for me it was a no-brainer. I mean, being in the government space and working international development and working for U.S. government for a while, I realized that this, you know, this is a global problem. But yet every change and every action, and especially actions that are going to have an impact, is all local. And as much as I like to think that I created the word, I didn't. But I think we all should be much more, we should have more knowledge and even best practices in this work called Glocal. So I intentionally use this word, and it is a movement, but it's also action. And for me, the target audience is the near billion girls in the developing world. And I tell people that this is such a moment of opportunity today. In fact, in Chinese, the word crisis is 2 characters. And the 2 characters are danger and opportunity. And the reason for that is because this huge, large population. That today we have the largest youth population in history. Why, you know, a day like today, the International Youth Day, is so important. And what is going to happen if, you know, if half of them are oppressed and continually being disempowered, and, you know, you're only going to have more violence, more terrorism, more young boys who are not satisfied with, you know, they're not getting, many of them are also getting educated. And in fact, you know, it's not just in these horrific, you know, violent areas. You're talking about, you know, a whole village in China and in India that have no eligible girls to get married to. So sex trafficking, human trafficking, it's only going to escalate. So even on the economic perspective, and even people who are just doing development work, they are seeing, you know, horrible crises everywhere because of this actually lack of girls. So that's why I started this organization. And also, it's not just an organization and doing work, it's a movement. So next slide, Colette.
There we are.
Okay, so it is a social change movement. And for me, this is again a no-brainer. It has to start with our mindset. And for most Americans, I think we get it. And in fact, there's a whole industry called self-help in the United States, because we realize whatever we think and we believe, that is how that's how we live our life. So if we don't see girls as being valuable, and if in societies they don't see girls as being valuable, this is never going to change. Everything is just going to be, one issue after the other. And at this moment in time, there's too many issues. My background is actually medicine. I went to medical school. And I always tell people, we are addressing the symptom and not the root cause. And as long as we work at that, with that strategy, there's just too many problems in this world to eradicate all of it. We have to target the root cause. So next slide, Colette.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the next and the other part of 4GGL is to take that local action. I work with universities and local organizations, and in fact, who work with large population. I was in Bangladesh, and I worked with 225,000 girls, because that's what the organization, how many they work with. So, and it's to really see them. This is beyond education. I see them as leaders. Just the way that you see yourself as a leader, and that's the reason why you're going to school. So it's no different. Why do we think that girls in developing country can't be leaders? I always tell people, leadership is not a failure of intelligence, it's a failure of opportunity. So we have to create these opportunities for girls to get experience on leadership. And clearly there's enough in these in developing countries, and in fact most of the population is young people. And I specifically target where there is violence and civil unrest, not because I have some death wish, but because it's almost prime for change. They are actually inviting me to come and work with them. In fact, they're so desperate for change. So next slide.
Go ahead.
So the work that I do is actually quite simple. I see a world where every single child, every single human being is valued and is able to realize, is supported, and work, is able to realize their full potential. And so the mission is not just action on the ground, but a movement, which begins with our own thinking about, that girl in that poor country somewhere. Instead of seeing her as some sort of a liability, I see her as the most powerful resource. And the approach, again, is Glocal. So next slide.
Go ahead.
And these are just gonna, you could flip them pretty fast, Colette. So instead of, again, for me, when you see this picture, most people are seeing her as a victim. Next slide.
Go ahead.
And for me, is to begin to see her as a girl with bright future. Next slide.
Go ahead.
And this is a young woman who I worked with in Pakistan, and she wanted to really know about leadership. And after training and coaching her, she created the first ever Young Women's Leadership Summit in Pakistan for 200 girls. And in fact, she's a remarkable example, because it was right after a horrific flood that Pakistan experienced. And she was able to, really galvanize her own colleagues and friends to really help with that effort. And then the community began to see her as a leader also. Next slide.
Go ahead.
And this is a young woman who actually I worked with when I was with the Secretary of Health. And, she was an orphan. She was an orphan from Russia. And last year, I saw her win the Boston Marathon, not only Boston, New York City Marathon, Chicago Marathon, and the London Marathon. So again, people say, well, how do you do it? And I'm like, I'm not doing it. They do it. But it's really to help them realize that there's no stopping, that, literally she is her own limitation. So next slide, Colette.
Go ahead.
So for me, and this is my call to action to you, as on the the day of International Youth Day, we launched the first ever global survey to hear the voices of young women. And what's really interesting is that we're even getting survey results from men, from young men, because they want to be heard. And it has been really well received, especially in the Middle East. Not surprising. And in fact, today I heard from a young woman from Iraq. And, you know, with all this that's going on, which, you know, I don't know anyone, unless you live in a hole, I guess you don't know what's going on in Iraq right now. And President Obama, who actually I work with the U.S. government on women, peace, and security, we get like I don't even know how many alerts a day because of this crisis that's going on, and now we're, you know, sending airstrikes like, I don't know, every minute it seems like. But for me, until we hear the voices of young people, there's no way we can even begin to create a solution. So I want to invite you all to take it. In fact, now we have it in 4 languages, and we're actually about to launch the Arabic version because of this huge surge of young people from the Middle East who want to be heard. And then I also want to invite all your friends. First, you know, this is leadership. You do it first, then you spread the word to others. So I want to have your friends and colleagues also take it. And the reason for that is because, you know, it really all begins with your voice. I mean, for me, the leadership training that I do is embedded in empowerment. And after the survey, we're going to do also an interview, and I'm writing a book actually for a social entrepreneurship curriculum that a university has asked me. But I don't, you know, it's really remarkable when people ask me, how do you do this? And I'm like, well, just hear the stories. You know, at the end of the day, it really is, it's so inspirational to hear these young women in places like Iraq and Pakistan who really is just doing what they know they can do. And yet, you know, there's so much that can be done, even sitting right here in, you know, New York City where you are, or where I am. Actually, I'm in North Carolina, and it's raining like crazy. The raining, I don't think I could stop it. But anyway, I know there's so much that ordinary individuals can do today that it is absolutely remarkable. So the last slide.
Go ahead.
And so this is, you know, again, my call to action to every one of you, that you can make a difference, and there's more information on the website. We're actually launching a new website, so much of the old website stuff is going to go away. But here's contact information. I work with young people, so I'd be absolutely delighted to hear from every one of you, and, you know, how you're going to go about create change in these issues that everyone articulated and that you feel passionate about, because that's where it begins. It begins with a passion. And, you know, I always tell any young person, if you don't have a passion and you don't really know how you're going to, you know, change the world, come talk to me. Just give me 5 minutes. I'll find something for you to feel passionate about.
Thank you very much, Jin, first for that presentation. We've all been listening and watching as the slides have advanced. Would you be willing to take a few questions?
Oh, absolutely. I can't leave without taking questions.
There we go. All right, excellent. Well, stand by. I'm going to ask those who would have questions for you to come up. They'll reintroduce themselves and the passions that they have for you, and we'll try to engage in a bit of a dialogue. All right, who would like to begin? Does anyone have a question for Jin? All right, Alex is going to begin.
Sure. Hi, Jen. I'm Alex. I'm passionate about women's empowerment, and I'm wondering what you're seeing on these surveys that you were telling us about, especially in the Middle East, and what these young women and men are saying in them.
Right. Well, right now we're just at the collecting data phase. And so you can, you know, take it yourself and then see what the questions are. I've actually, every so often, so actually I'm working with an amazing research group who actually does this stuff in the United States and in schools and universities. So, but we're asking them actually very basic questions, like, you know, do you feel that your voice is being heard? And remarkably so, that their answers are not that much different from the answers that we're getting from United States. So actually, we've covered A through Z, from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, and the answers are not that much different. And in fact, it's not even that much different as far as young men versus young women. It is really wanting to, have their voices heard, what matters to them. What's so remarkable and interesting about today versus in history is that, and actually I just recently heard President Obama speak about this, that the 21st century, the change and social change is what is happening. And why does in fact, they call this new social movement versus, I don't know if there was old social movement, but today it's really about human rights and social values and about what's important to us and happiness versus way back when it was about politics or military or economy. That's what drove change. So it is not surprising that what is valuable to us, what's valuable to you, young people want to be heard. And that's where it all starts. And I always tell people, I created a group when I was working for the Secretary of Health, and I brought together a group of young women across, actually across the United States, but around the world. And the U.S. government actually thought, oh my goodness, where are we getting all these rich, information? And I'm like, the girls. So this is, I know something that I know I do well. I go around and hear voices of young women. So, but I think people think that, oh, what are young women in Iraq saying? Believe it or not that much different than what you feel passionate about and what you want to comment.
Jin, we see you now, and we have the PowerPoint in a different window, so we are seeing you live. Are there other questions or even comments that you might have after Jin's presentation? Jin, I'm curious, how is it that you decided to choose the word glocal? I mean, I came across it by reading literature really about management and business, and I was very interested in bringing the local level in to a course that really is titled Global Civil Society, and most people think, well, that's about the UN. We have, of course, experts here on faculty at NYU who work at the UN and who have made a life's career of being at the UN. I wanted to bring into this community local experiences to inform global conversations, so that was my approach. But I'm curious, and I believe the members would be as well. How did you develop your global approach?
Yeah, well, very good question. First, I'm a disruptor. I love thinking and creating and innovating on words and approach and tactics that most people are not thinking about. So to be honest, I don't actually even know how I came up with, how I even was introduced to the word glocal. But when I looked it up, first I knew it existed because it's a Wikipedia word, and I always tell people I didn't make it up as much as and in fact most people think I'm spelling it wrong when I'm doing presentation, and I always tell people, no, I went to medical school, I can spell global. But what's really interesting to me is, so the sector I work with, which is U.S. government and other government, really old. And so, but the reality for me, that when I found the word glocal, I realized how really pinpoint approach this was, and that it really is, because people know that global this, global that, but the reality is when most people do think about global, they're thinking of over there, outside of United States. And for me, global includes United States. So when I tell people that this is change globally, I'm including us. I'm including you and I, and not those people over there, because that strategy never works. Those people. Once you have that, you've already separated yourself from that. Whether you think whatever we're doing is right and what they're doing is wrong. And that type of approach has never worked. I mean, that's what equality is about. And I always tell people, I use that sentence, I am. I finished it with, I am a girl, because I am one with the population that I am working with. And I have found, and other best practices, those people who actually truly understand the population, who feel one with their population, is actually the best, you know, best servant, best trainer, best worker, because you feel what they feel, you know their lives. And you know, I shared with Colette just a chapter 1 of my life story and why I do what I do. And that's because when I was born, my birth country's GDP was that of Ghana. Ghana. Today it's South Korea. So, and what's even more remarkable is that when my mother was born, the GDP of South Korea was less than that of North Korea. And, you know, everybody knows, in fact. And I recently spoke to college students from Afghanistan, and when I told them that, even they gasped, because they think that Afghanistan is better than North Korea. So, you know, we actually, I believe, change is possible. And in fact, you know, it's we actually joke about it in these international or the global circle, because, you know, the World Bank president is South Korean, the UN Secretary General South Korean. It's like we're all on some, you know, high-speed change. And so we really do believe change is possible, but it has to be local and it has to be invested by the people. And that's the reason why I just absolutely love that word.
When you talk about empowerment, Jin, which is really a central thesis as I read about your life's engagement and I look at the different PowerPoints you've prepared for this community, it makes me think of a book that's assigned in this class called The Other, which contrasts the self and the other being interpreted in some ways as non-white, as foreign, as not us. And when I think of Glocal, what that makes me think of is bringing in the idea of empowerment and equality and including, being inclusive, to make for a community that really speaks to more global issues. It's about people, and in your case it's about women and girls in particular, but it's about people and not just states. When we think of the UN, I mean, it's a system of states. When we think of empowerment, I mean, the empowerment in this century, I believe, is going to be the empowerment of people, the empowerment of human beings. And that, to me, is at the essence of the Glocal.
Right, absolutely. And in fact, you know, the work that I do, again, I never, I mean, again, my background is working with the U.S. government, but never in my entire life did I think that I would be with, you know, Department of Defense and Joint National Security Advisors and Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the reason why I'm with them and I engage with them and we're on the same panel or in the same group is because the greatest, you know, national security, I mean, why do we go to war, right? It's when Americans are threatened. And when we all sit around the table and we talk about what is the best indicator of knowing that a community is safe, whether it be Iraq, or at least we thought it was safe for us to leave militarily, or whether it be Afghanistan. And, you know, I sit with these, you know, actually quite powerful group of people who have spent trillions and trillions of dollars on military. And we just don't have that, we don't have that anymore. And in fact, no country has that anymore. But when we sit there and we think about, okay, what is the indicator? And people talk about, oh, building an army, building a police force that is stable. How can we know for sure that a country or a community is safe? And I always say, okay, you know, actually, again, this is not rocket science. I know an easy indicator. Can girls walk to school safely? And, you know, it's amazing to me. They all look at me as if I'm Jesus or Muhammad or Gandhi or whatever, because they're like, oh my God, she's right. Can a girl walk to school safely? You know, and that's the reason why it's so remarkable to me that in this day that we can actually have conversation with people, because they all care and they think about how can we empower the people so that it is more secure in that community. And really the solution, you know, I always tell people the world's most powerful force for change is the next generation of women leaders who are going to really not only change their community, but they're going to change the world. And, you know, and this is like the untapped secret. And no country, including the United States, is going to, you know, maximize our economic and innovation and everything if half of it is, half the people are, is left behind. But what's really, really sad is that, you know, it's actually not even half the people. So, I mean, everyone's a master's student or global affairs student. I like to ask this group, do you think that there is more women in the world or more men in the world?
Actually, before we turn that over, I mean, the point that you're making, I mean, quite frankly, I mean, what purpose does any government or any state have if its citizens, and particularly its young girls, can't walk to school safely? I mean, what is the purpose of government if not to assure the security and the empowerment and the development of its own people? The other piece, I think, of what you're talking about, which resonates very, very strongly, is the idea of this Glocal model, empowerment model, as an alternative way of thinking about peaceful development, an alternative way to war, which is, again, one of the themes in a book by Mary Kaldor that's been assigned to this course, Global Civil Society. But let's come back to your question. Robert, did you want to try to answer what you... Robert is answering that he thinks there are more women, Jin.
Okay, what about, by show of hands, Colette, why don't you see how many think it's more women versus men?
All right, show of hands, how many think it's more women? All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. By far, the majority think it's more women. We have about 17 here this evening. By far, the majority say it's women.
Okay, and those, how many think that there's actually more men?
Any show of hands, more men. There isn't one hand that's gone up, Jin. You should see it. No hands up.
Okay, so that means everyone thinks there's more women in the world.
Correct.
Okay, well, you know what? I'm beginning to feel kind of iffy about this group, and you know, your master's student. There's actually more men in this world. And I just told you the biggest giveaway that 100 million have been killed. And in fact, the number is actually very much skewed in the favor of men. It's about every 100 to every 105. So for every 105 men, there's about 100 women. So, and in countries like, or in regions like Middle East, 60% are young people. South Asia, 2/3 of them are young people. And 70% of Africa is under the age of 30 years old. You could imagine that if we keep killing the girls off at the rate that we are, the world is going, the violence, you know, people who are worried about peace and security, there is no peace and security. And in fact, you can't hide. I mean, I was just in this small little town in France, you know, the most quaint, beautiful little town off of French Alps. And even they are talking about having terrorist attacks in their lovely village. You know, so really, no place is safe. And that's the reason why every single person, I mean, I don't even care if you're a truck driver, I talk with everyone. It's like, here, let me tell you about something I feel very passionate about and that you should care too. This is really the issue of our century.
We are in agreement there, Jin. And I would like to just one more request. Are there any other questions or comments before we thank Jin for her presentation? Jin, it remains for me to thank you once again for joining us this evening. It's been a bit of an unorthodox way to present for you. By the same token, we've benefited from your extensive experience and knowledge and your gracious presence. So I want to thank you so much for joining us, for preparing this PowerPoint, and for sharing your story and your life's engagement with us. We look forward to future presentations from you where you actually see the members of this community, but it remains for us to say thank you so much and a warm applause from us all.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Like I said, to me, I mean, my life's mission is to engage with young people. And, you know, I talk about my work, obviously, to work with the next generation of women leaders, but really it's no different than every single person who is in your classroom. I know that's where change happens. It's not with me. I just work to empower them and train them. But the reality is the critical change is going to be with each one of you who are sitting right there. And, you know, really, you are going to change the world. And in fact, the world depends on it. And it is in such crisis right now that, you know, what you just articulated, every single person articulated, and I wrote it down actually because this is what I love. I love tracking and keeping up with people. And so again, my call to action, please take the survey because I know you want to be included in the first ever global survey for these young people, but especially young women. And then please spread it around, and, you know, especially if you know people outside of the United States. And in fact, you know, Facebook is such a, I mean, talk about a small group. I just talking to this young woman from Iraq, you know, and I don't even know how many she knows, but they're all of a sudden Facebooking me and wanting to be friend. And in fact, 4GGL has a Facebook group, so I definitely invite you to join. So it's these small acts, you know, everyone is part of these communities, the Facebook community, the survey is just, it's so easy that these little things actually do matter. This is how you see change happen and how you see young people creating change. So I very much look forward. I hope this is just the beginning of a dialogue, and I hope to hear from, you know, many of you, if not all of you, because I truly do believe the world depends on it, and in fact, I see every one of you as change makers.
Well, indeed, we will make sure that all of the contact information for the website, for your email information, will all be available for each and every one of the members. Thank you again so much, Jin, and I wish you much success in the important work that you're doing both in North Carolina and beyond. We look forward to future conversations with you, and have a wonderful rest of the summer. We'll talk again very soon.
Great, thank you.
All the best, dear. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.